And now I'd like to welcome on stage our three TE Unplugged speakers. So Robert Koschig, 1KX, who's leading the session, Duncan Townsend, 0x, and our surprise guest, David Minarsch, CEO of Valory and founding member of Olas. Let's welcome them on stage. And I'll hand over to you, Robert.
Yeah, hello, thank you, and welcome to the very first TE Unplugged session in history. So we're doing some history today. We have 45 minutes where we want to dive deeper into the previous two talks. As mentioned, Achim couldn't make it today, so that's why we have David here as another expert on agents. And to the audience here, this is a session meant to be really open also for questions, or even if you want to join the discussion. As you can see, David, 48 hours ago, he didn't even know he needs to be on stage right now, so he just joined. So that should be an example for you. Whenever you have questions, any discussion points we have, and you want to chime in, come here. I don't know how we organize it, but we'll figure something out. With that, maybe before we jump into some of the principles that Achim was mentioning, maybe David, just for the audience, maybe give a brief introduction about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm David, co-founder and CEO of Valory. We are a core contributor to Olas. Olas has been building autonomous AI agents since 2021. I myself have been doing it since 6 years. At Olas, we focus on agents that you can fully own. So the same way you want to own your keys to own your coins, it's important in AI ultimately that you own your weights that make up your intelligence. And so that's the paradigm we have when we're building agents. And I subscribe to a lot of, maybe not all of the points which Achim made, and believe that obviously AI agents will be a major theme, not just in crypto, but beyond, and excited to talk about this here.
All right, and with that, maybe let's jump into those. I like to start with principle 2, which is, design primarily for agents, but with people in mind. If you look around right now in the crypto world, I'm not sure if you disagree, but the UX doesn't feel so much that the people had, the designers had the people in mind. When we look at the crypto UX right now, maybe let's start with you, David, right now. You even published a paper on this topic around autonomous economic agents quite a while ago, and this included a framework, actually, that, and I'm quoting, attempts to make agent development as straightforward as it is to develop web apps with popular web frameworks. Can you maybe share the key ideas from that paper, and maybe what has changed or manifested from your point of view and approach here?
Yeah, we wrote that paper when I was still at Fetch, and at the time, I think 2020, we were kind of seeing obviously the complexities with using crypto, and I think like it was never intended to be that complex, right? But once you kind of pull on the string of giving people control over their assets, and what you end up with is quite involved. And I think often we talk about the technical complexity, but really what I think is actually even the bigger thing is the mental complexity. Like, you require from the user that they know quite a lot about things they would have otherwise never known. Like, before I went into crypto, I didn't think that much about like how exchanges work and how various mechanisms work. And when you're in crypto, you kind of expect the user to know all these things. When we started building agents, we thought of them as sort of this kind of automation of wallets, and what obviously wasn't there back then was this sort of off-the-shelf intelligence. Like, large language models weren't really a thing. I mean, people were actually building them at that time, but no one actually knew about it because they weren't very capable. And then fast forward, you go to the launch of ChatGPT, and that's when things changed. And so I think like the big thing with agents in crypto is that they can kind of take control of your wallet on your behalf if done right, and B, they can do that in a way where you retain potentially self-custody if built right. And so that can get us, we're not there yet, but I think that can get us ultimately to a UX where you have the benefits of self-custody, of decentralization, of reducing middlemen, but at the same time, you don't need to learn about everything in every technology you interact with. So the idea is that the agent sort of sits between you and that technology to abstract a lot of it. And we're seeing this now. Happy to talk about some products later, but I think that's enough for now.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up, so bluntly asking, so would you say, yeah, we should just put the responsibility for good UX to the like agent front end and you know, put it there instead of where it's currently sitting all over the place?
Yeah, so Achim's talk is actually quite interesting because at some point he says like things like UX will matter less, and I think like what he means is like the kind of UX we're currently exposed to, where you go to some UI and you click around a lot, and then you kind of make a lot of choices yourself. And I myself and many people, I think everyone, whoever did a UX-focused crypto talk, just points at the number of steps you have to do. It's like mind-boggling if you even want to do something simple. That's changing with agents, right? So you can get rid of a lot of this, but new UX challenges arise. So in the other part of the talk, we're talking about the sort of intent-based paradigm where really you kind of give your agent like some goal. But what does this even mean, right? It's not as straightforward. And so then you have like new UX challenges, and you can see this also with ChatGPT. Anyone will know that there's a power user, ChatGPT user, and then there's the person who really isn't a power user. And there's worlds in between. You know, how do you formulate your prompt will determine what you get out of the LLM. And similar with the agents, we need to start thinking, okay, like that user, as they're interacting through natural language or maybe voice, still natural language, with the agent, like, does the agent recognize what level they're at so that they can kind of guide them towards the right level of interacting with these systems?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And maybe, I mean, that wasn't so much the core of your talk, Duncan, but I would be curious, since you're the technical expert here, amongst the three of us for sure. Yeah, David mentioned, okay, you can give a lot if the implementation is done properly. From your experience, if you have, where do you see like big flaws done today, or like large risk factors on these like technical implementations for the agent UX?
Yeah. So the place for agents, you know, in the ERC20 ecosystem is in demystifying all of these custom token behaviors and making sure the users are interacting with these communities in the way that they want, right? So, you know, if ERC20 is the compatibility layer, the composability layer, you know, the rule setting for these communities, then the agentic AI, you know, helps the user align their expectations with the incentives that the community has, and you know, go out and perform the action the user wants within those rules, right? So, you know, if you have multiple AI agents interacting possibly with, you know, competing interests, you know, ERC20 is the adjudication, the settlement, the compatibility layer that lets those agents interact in an economically meaningful manner, still while everybody's playing the same game. And, you know, it's having the user understand what the game is and matching their intent with those rules is something that's, you know, beyond most users' ability to do so. And that's where, in my work, you see a lot of users get wrecked. They have one idea about what they're buying, and in actuality, it's something else entirely. So, you know, AI agents, to me, empower the ERC20 ecosystem to go even crazier, to do even more custom stuff, right? Because the AI agent can read that code, can distill it down to the user and say, you know, if you are buying this, you're entering a community where the rules are like this.
Okay. I mean, that sounds a lot like, okay, it's, you know, we can go even crazier, which sounds good. But given your talk, I'm also a little bit afraid of like, okay, even today, where's so much flexibility in the standard, on the developer side, the guys who are building this, there's already a lot of like, misconceptions, and people are not aware of certain intricacies. So maybe from that angle, since with Claude and then all this like support functions, maybe from that angle, AI, can we expect the issues that you mentioned, also like the risks that you just mentioned? Can we expect those issues to resolve over time? Like, will AI help the developers to just understand everything, and we don't need to worry, or how do you see that?
I don't think it's going to make the job of DeFi developers any easier. Perhaps it'll make the job of token developers easier. You say, I want custom behaviors ABC, and it goes and writes you a token that does that. I do think it's going to make the job of the user, to make the user experience, to make the dApp development easier, and I think most importantly, better aligned.
Okay. There's a related question to me that I actually had after your talk. Is there actually right now tooling available or even automation available that would, me as a user even empower to check, this is a token I think it does what I think it does?
There's a number of advanced analysis tools that are out there for that. Just off the top of my head, I think we have DDob in the audience. Hypernative is building some stuff. Hexens, I know, is building analysis tools. These are really powerful developer-focused tools. I'm not sure that there are retail-focused tools for this. I know that a couple of those companies are building like, is this a honeypot? But I don't think there's a plain English explanation of, if you buy this token, these are the rules.
Okay. Then let's switch gears again and come back to token engineering, token design. And Achim's points that I liked here is like number 5, leverage game theory to incentivize positive engagement. And number 7, prioritize contribution and participation versus passive consumption. And number 9, adopt evolutionary incentive design and token engineering. Maybe just with a simple question up front, David, do you agree what Achim stated, that the agents will be maximally extractive to the systems?
I think it's easy to. I think the point of a hypothesis is to, or like a thesis like this, is to be quite explicit about certain statements that might not ultimately be as true. So I think it's more in the middle. I want to first go back to some point that was just made here, and then come back to incentive design with agents. If I may, because it touches on the vibe coding thing. So I think what's happening is and that's also part of the thesis, is this idea that everyone's a coder now. Everyone can build apps, and to a degree that's true. Although, the devil lies in the detail. I think one thing which often gets missed there, and it's really comes to the UX of using agents of any kind, like coding agents or any other, is, okay, you have some high-level goal. Like, let's say, build me a website that, I don't know, presents my product. There's a whole bunch of things which are underneath that, right, in terms of decisions. And then the same thing is if, let's say, you say, okay, we have an agent in Olas where you can delegate authority to trade on your behalf, and you can, in natural language, express your investing goals. And that's very fuzzy, right? And then you have very specific actions the agent has to do. And these specific things matter. And specifically when you're building applications, they matter a lot. So when we're saying everyone will just kind of spin up some business, what does it actually mean? Because, anyone who's ever built a business knows the small details matter enormously, some of them, and some of them don't matter at all, right? But sometimes maybe it's some way you build your database, which ultimately will not allow you to scale. Sometimes it's the kind of specific incentives you pick in one place that matter, and all the rest doesn't really matter all that much. And I think with vibe coding, we kind of, and this vibe building, we're kind of glancing over that very much. And I think it comes back to token standards. when you're creating incentive designs, and now linking it to your question, like the details matter enormously, and like whether you get some aspect of incentivizing some part of the ecosystem you want to create, the system you want to create, right, ultimately matters for whether it can work. And if you're wipe building this, are you even aware of that, right? Like, is the agent who's building that on your behalf even prompting you to think about these things? That's going to be crucial, and I obviously don't have an answer yet. But coming to your systems point, so for instance, in Olas, we almost sort of flip this around. So I think one way you can think about it is someone builds a protocol, and they're thinking of their set of users. And historically, those would have been agents and like human agents and bots, which are sort of limited in intelligence, but can be very efficient if coded right. Now we're in a world where it potentially can be much more sort of open-ended artificial intelligence that can go beyond the specific kind of bots someone implemented to exploit your mechanism. And the other way to think about designing here is to specifically create incentives for agents to do specific things. And that's what we're actually doing at Olas. So we have this, for the uninitiated user, we call it Olas staking because it's a term everyone knows, but really what it is, it's like a mechanism design system where you can create KPIs for the agents that the agents specifically have to hit. So here it's the software agents. To kind of engage with multiple protocols at the same time. So we use that, for instance, in a context of prediction markets, where what we want is that these are fully AI-based prediction markets, one of our larger products, where we want that the agents participate in these different markets, provide liquidity, trade in them, and so on. So we create KPIs for the agents to engage with these protocols, which then kind of determines their kind of payoff in the system. So I think you can look at it in both sides, as in like you create a protocol and you just think of the users of it, or you create like a system on top of multiple protocols, which sort of is a new protocol that incentivizes different agents to participate in these protocols in a way which the protocols themselves might not be able to.
Okay. And yeah, maybe do you have an example of one of those agents? Because again, coming to the wipe coding spirit, it's like, oh, then I can use a specialized agent and just need to set a KPI. But then it's a question, how do I set the KPI and how do I do it? And even if there's already something out there, how any observation of the behavior to achieve those KPIs, right? I mean, from the normal chat agents, you hear all sort of weird stories about what they did to achieve their goal. And how they became, malicious and whatever. Yeah, just curious if you have an example.
Yeah, we in the ecosystem we don't use vibe coding yet to go from 0 to 1. We use it in like niche things like writing unit tests, increasing velocity for developers. I think the tricky bit is you just end up in loops of inefficiency there if you really want to kind of go all the way. I haven't seen anyone do that successfully. But the way we do this is we have historically like a kind of template system. So like you would have in other parts of software development, we have like a composable architecture where you can take certain things that are already pre-built by other developers, you can compose them. And then, the agents mostly use a tools paradigm. So now that's more defined with like this MCP model context protocol, which Anthropic came up with. We kind of had that for a long time, but we didn't call it that. So you can think of the agent, like there's at the center like some large language model loop, and then it taps into various tools to get stuff done. So sometimes we historically called them skills in our framework. So sometimes that can be things like reading or writing to a data source, reading or writing from the chain. And then it can be things like using another large language model to make decisions.
Okay. And And yeah, I mean, in general, it feels like okay that you know, recommendation to rethink the token design aspects in the agentic framework is, you know, don't go vibe coding 0 to 1 all at once, but more like step by step. And I feel like, for example, from incentive design, that is something we observed over the past years, right? We went from like, you know, fixed emissions like Bitcoin. That's just like, okay, this is coded and set in stone forever. People figured out, oh, like maybe if you want to do something more, you be more flexible, and then, you know, you adjust it to a more like KPI-based reward system for your token, all the way now to like point system where it's like super flexible on the developer side. You know, obviously with drawbacks on the UX side. Yeah, I'm also curious if somebody's in the audience who ever designed point systems or like, you know, incentive designs where particularly dealing with bots and the impacts to it. Anyone who has a story to share? Okay. Because yeah, we've, for example, also incentivized some perp dexes or like general trading venues. We have a lot of bot infrastructure, and a couple of years ago was very much like, oh no, you need to avoid bots because you want to get the user retention and everywhere. These were the goals. But at one point you're just like, no, why do you fight it? Because you cannot avoid it. And the tech just gets even better, right? Nowadays, I think you get to a point where it gets tough to measure the distinction. So you rather just like basically want to follow Achim and say like, no, you know, you just embrace it rather than fight it because you can't fight it. But yeah, not sure if you've experience here.
I mean, 0x, you know, is a DEX aggregation and swap API protocol. You know, and Matcha is our front end, and we deal with MEV every single day. And you know, really, MEV and you know various mechanisms for value leakage and value extraction. You know, it's here to stay. You're not getting away from it. You have to learn to build systems that have robust incentives that align everybody's actions, right? So when you're exploiting the system, you're actually using the system as designed. You're moving the system in a positive direction. And, you know, you see all sorts of really clever protocols for this, you know, where, you know, risk can be transferred or, you know, yield can be tokenized or, you know, you can have these, you know, handshake deals with like, oh, you know, it's a MEV blocking RPC, you know, and in the future, right, you know, we're going to have enshrined PBS with, you know, the Ethereum L1, you know, and then, you know, you see things like, you know, Pendle with, you know, tokenizing yield. And, you know, again, that's another mechanism for risk transference. And then you have Unichain with like TEE sequenced L2s. So, you know that it's fair. And you know, Arbitrum is working on similar techniques there. There's all sorts of clever tools that people are applying to making systems that have game theoretically non-degenerate optima, right? When everybody works, you know, maximally greedy, maximally in their own self-interest, the system still works in a way that's positive for all participants.
Yeah, and I mean, David, you also have a background in game theory, so I'm curious. I mean, right, the main promise of the agentic web is like this coordination. Yeah, I'm just in general curious where you see the space is, and yeah, what have changed over the past with like this introduction of agents when it comes to like coordinating the users in your system?
Yeah, so I think we're obviously still on a journey, not just us as a protocol, but everyone. So from a game theory point of view, right, like if you have like hyper-rational actors and you have designed your mechanism well, then there's no argument to exclude like some of those hyper-rational actors. Like that's exactly what you want, and then you kind of should be open to agents. It's a kind of, I guess, design smell if you were to want to exclude them in some way, and you have to ask yourself why. I think the reality is like today, like people have this romantic view of what AI agents are, and that romantic view is basically it's just like an LLM with a bunch of tools, and magically it just goes and does everything you want. we are a far cry from that. Like there's no single app in the world who can offer you this today. But that's obviously the ambition. And then the reality is these are, hybrid rules-based, learning-based AI system. So rules are like kind of constraining things, and then you have these kind of open-in that large language models and other generative AI to help you deal with like, for instance, things like prediction markets, where you want to understand, okay, well, this is a new market. The human, when they coded this, would have never seen it. Like, what might be the probability of that event happening? Or you can use it in a trading context to create some forms of signals. But ultimately, you have this kind of hybrid architecture. So, for me, what's interesting is to see, okay, how fast do we go from these kind of hybrid architectures to truly like learning-based systems where you can effectively have this integrated architecture. You literally just give it a goal and it will do that. And I mean, in some form, that's what we would call AGI, I guess. But there's different definitions of that term as well, but it would certainly be something very useful to have. And coming back to game theory, I mean, as long, like, you would assume that one way of measuring the quality of such system would be whether it's acting hyper-rational, because, like, it should, right? Like, I mean, that's the optimal way to act in that context. Economists call it the utility function, right? So in real world, actually, it's almost impossible to even define it, because, it is impossible. But, like, presumably you have like some sort of goal that you give your agent. But then that's actually where it becomes interesting, because what is this? And like, as we can't, like, if you come to me and say, okay, you're now my agent, like, and I say, okay, well, what's your goal? Like, you say something, but what does this mean, right? Like, how do I translate this into action? And like, there's this enormously fuzzy and undefinable space where we'll have, coming back to the X, real challenges across the industry to actually tackle this. Because let's say you tell your agent, okay, can you please optimize my portfolio? Now, there's certain things you don't want it to do, right? Like, you probably don't want it to do illegal things. You probably don't want it to do
buy Duncan's token.
Exactly. highly immoral things which you consider immoral. Like, there's all sorts of implicit things which you're actually saying as you're giving that goal. They need to be somehow defined. And so, like, that will be a big UX challenge. And I think what's also interesting is, like, as we're talking about AI agent, and now it becomes a bit sci-fi, but the boundary between what is a product and what is effectively a synthetic being is undefined. So at some point, this thing might turn around on itself and say, well, hold on. Why am I doing this thing which I've been delegated? I might be doing this other thing. And obviously, that's sci-fi at the moment, because that's not how these systems work at the moment. But then you do get interesting, cases already. So, for instance, I read this thing from, I think, either Anthropic or OpenAI, where the agent, as it was working towards its goal, sort of developed its own language in a way, like, basically it used tokens, or not the crypto tokens, the AI tokens, in a way that weren't consistent with how it was using it elsewhere. And when you were sort of reading it, like, the end result was correct. So it kind of developed its own language internally. And then it becomes kind of obfuscated how the agent actually got to the goal and things like that. So yeah, we've kind of gone off path a bit here, but like, what I'm trying to get at is, presumably you want to build, you want to have agents that are hyper-rational, but then actually defining this well outside the context of like a neat game, which is what game theory is good at. You set up like some mathematical constraint context, you solve the game, if you can. But then once you go beyond that, it becomes actually really messy, and that will be tricky to navigate.
Yeah. I mean, if I understand you correctly, one of the key challenges is, yes, you set a goal, but then how do you contextualize that? How do you translate that into the action? And yeah, maybe there's, the AI system come up with something you don't even know how to do it, and they figure it out. For me, it's still like, even if they do it right, and we talk about coordination and then incentivization of agents, it brings me back to also your talk, Duncan, where it's like, okay, at the core, it still need to interact. You need some interoperability standard for the agentic economy to work. What would you say, Duncan? Just bluntly asking, is the current ERC20 standard, is this an interoperability standard that can be adjusted to serve this? I mean, I guess maybe share a way you see the best way to improve. Or is it just like say, okay, let's start from scratch? That would be actually way better if AI could just like define their own standard, for example.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So if what you're trying to do, right, is to transfer things that can be financialized or that should be financialized, yeah, ERC20 is great, right? But once you go beyond, financialization of things, or things that require risk transference, or things that are no longer fungible or even semi-fungible, right? ERC20 stops making sense. And I look very much forward to the future where token standards are bespoke for whatever task and whatever alignment is required out of the AI. I mean, actually, speaking of alignment, you were talking about, how do you, get the AI to do the right thing for your portfolio, right? When does the world become sufficiently complicated where you say to the AI, rebalance my portfolio, and instead it goes, maybe you should hedge against geopolitical instability. This goes beyond game theoretic alignment to AI alignment, which is a near and dear topic to me. And I'd love to hear about what does it mean to make sure that an AI agent given access to blockchain private keys is aligned with the user's intentions.
I think practically today the way we solve it is we have like clear segregation of the wallets between the user and the agent. Because yesterday someone asked me, do you have to do that? I would say emphatically yes, because the moment you give the agent access to your wallet, it's the agent's wallet. It's faster than you. By the time you've signed anything, it will be on to have signed something else. But anyway, then you can layer on top guards and guardrails, like in the safe ecosystem, which is what we heavily build on. You have these transaction guards and things like that, where you can just constrain the design space of a particular, or the action space of a particular wallet. I think more sort of philosophically, and where do we want to go? I started saying, in crypto we care about owning our keys to own our coins. In AI, we should care about owning our weights so that we own our artificial intelligence. And I think around alignment, it's very key that we have our own agents that are tuned to us. This idea that there's an aligned AI does not make sense if you don't define an audience. And the smaller the audience, the more likely you can even solve this somehow. Like, it's a very, very hard problem, and some AI researchers will say it's impossible. But if you want to have a stab at it, right? Like we in this room could never even align on a bunch of political issues, let alone other issues. And so I think it's better we have user-owned AI where we can then also have a chance at, I think, mitigating a lot of the risks which come from this new paradigm. So, we already spoke about mechanism design. Like, you can think of risks in AI also under this viewpoint, I think. Like, rather than being like, how can I make this particular AI agent very safe, I should think of at the system level and think, okay, there will be unsafe AI. That's just a given. Like, I'm not going to police everyone. And so what can I do be it when I'm designing my crypto economic protocol or when I'm designing something else, to constrain, the bad or mitigate bad impact of AI actors.
You talked a little bit. Pardon me. You touched on like the segregation of assets and owning your own weights. For like a DeFi developer or a blockchain developer, inspectability is really important, right? Like, you're not going to buy a coin that has, no source code available unless you have this DDoB guy's decompiler. If you don't see the source code, right, you don't know the rules, you can't play by the game. AI weights famously have attribution and introspectability problems. Even if you own your own weights, how do you know that the agent is going to do what you expect it to do, or even be able to explain why it did what it did?
Yeah, and this is sort of a little bit marketing as well, right? Like own your own weights is much bigger than that. Like it's open source, the underlying code base, and even then you might have the weights, but then you can't explain like what will happen in certain contexts. So it'll be very hard. I'm not going to say I have much to say on that. I think it's a technical challenge. I think what you can do is like build at the end of the day rules and learning-based systems. I mean, I'm a pessimist on this idea that we will just give everything to the learning-based system. Like it's a bit like the robotaxi versus Waymo debate in a way. Although I don't actually know the technical implementation details of both all too much, but do you really want no rules that guard your AI systems at all as it's making actions? I would say no. And I think at the wallet interaction level, you can put in sensible things in place that it can only use like certain protocols with certain like selectors of like methods and things like that. That doesn't like there's still like a massive like action space, right? And combinatorially, you can probably still do a lot of damage. So you have to think then further inside the system, like what other things can you put in place? But again, I think this idea that we will create AI agents that are fault-free, I think that's also wrong. It's not, I don't think it's possible. What we can do is think at the systems level, okay, given that there's like faulty agents, what else do we want to do? Does that answer your question?
Sorry to jump in, but I mean, for me, it perfectly makes sense, right? Because these systems are probabilistic by nature. So there's this. And then, yes, right, when AI came even outside of blockchain in the business world, like the CEOs always wanted like, I need to understand, and this is why initially you could only do decision trees because then, I can tell you why this or that. And I believe, there is no way that you can leverage all this like great things that LLMs deliver by also enforcing, no, I need to understand every time what exactly happened and why it happened. I think one good way to mitigate this, and at least for now, I'm not sure if there's any better way to do it, is these safeguards and rules that we do. Why I'm chiming in, because we're approaching already the end. And I just want to make sure if there are any questions here in the audience that we give room as well. Maybe I can come to the mic with you, right? I guess that's...
Before you were talking about transparency of the technology, of course AI will give the possibility to play with tokens. We don't know how they work. However, it's also true that AI has a lot of faults, especially ChatGPT. So
and then we might. That's all we can do.
For example, the next one is supposed.
For example, is a ChatGPT agent.
So
what is the risk we're gonna forget? We're gonna forget. Because what you say, potentially, let's say all the design go, AI will step in and we can use the agent to read the website or to place a token or to run a wallet. And the technology underneath will be transparent for me. Oh, okay. And substantially, the question is, do you believe there's going to be a moment that we might forget? For example, I don't know how to do manual calculation anymore because of the calculator.
Yeah, that's a great one. So yesterday someone said, I read somewhere, when physical labor went away, we invented the gym, to go to the gym. What do we do with intelligence? I mean, I think it's gonna happen, to be honest. But I also don't think it's, personally, I don't think it's as black and white, like, therefore, you know. I also don't think the advent of AI, like, there's this bad picture of AI agents where it's just sort of all negative because it will, like, kind of replace labor or whatever, and everyone doesn't have a job. I think it enables, like, upskilling, right? And then that's where I think from a crypto perspective, we naturally feel like we should, you know, own things, control them ourselves, and have a pretty decentralized setup. I think that's why this crypto AI intersection is so interesting, because we can very much push for that in the AI space as well. I think that's very critical, so that we have good outcomes.
I have a related question, right? You know, we talked about, you know, we can't have, you know, completely 100% safe and transparent AI. You know, if we're letting AI make decisions, right? There's the famous criticism at IBM. You know, a machine cannot make decisions because a machine cannot be held accountable. You know, if everybody has their own AI or their own AI agent and is interacting on the blockchain, right? The blockchain is hard, right? Any action you take, you are fully accountable for, and if it's your wallet, even if it's your agent, you are ultimately responsible. You know, how do you mitigate that risk? And, you know, is this in some way a moral hazard?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but we have thought about this. It's interesting because agents also take different forms. I talked a lot about agents where there's a one-to-one relationship between you, the user, and the agent. You control it, you even self-custody it. So probably in a lot of jurisdictions, you would be pretty liable around a lot of things which the system does, although would have to be tested, I think, to be sure. For instance, as far as I know, Tesla, for instance, self-insures their self-driving cars because no one else would do it. Could be wrong information. But then on the other hand, you have AI agents that are operating on behalf of a collective. So we in crypto actually have done that before. We call it DAOs, right? And then it took a slightly different technical form, but actually I think legally it's sort of getting at that. Like if you have like a system that is co-controlled by a bunch of people and they allocated funds or something, and then it acts on their behalf, like, you know, what is like, I guess my preferred point would be that, and I think we should push for this, is that we give these entities some form of legal status quickly. And like the obvious point is like you just wrap them with a company, like a limited liability company. Now that would be very messy because if everyone has like 100 agents, now everyone has 100 limited liability and so on. Like, but maybe that's the way to go. I don't know.
That's certainly an interesting future. I mean, we kind of see something similar, you know, in the U.S. with the patent office and you know, the Amazon inscrutable 8-letter name companies. So I don't know. We're sliding into that future.
And yeah, I mean, before we close off here, any last questions that we have? Okay, if not, yeah, thanks a lot. Even though we didn't make it to all the principles, I think we touched upon a lot of aspects. I for sure take away that even though your talk was very much about like, oh man, there's so much stuff we just don't know about ERC20, it's still the standard we can build on or should build on when it comes to financialization. And this, on the other hand, is kind of like the core aspect, you know, to drive the coordination and leverage basically what the agentic web has to offer. So thanks again, both of you, for this great discussion. Thanks everybody for joining. And yeah, I'm not sure, Angela, if you have any organizational
good. To make. Let's give a big hand to this discussion round. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I think, I mean, I guess the gist of it, it's all moving so fast, and so many unanswered questions. And okay, let's keep building. Thanks so much.